welcome Dr. Burchard.
How are you? I'm going to wait till Marcia. So good to see you again, and welcome back to those of you that I spent lunch with today. Dr. Hunt is going to fix the screen so we can get started. Okay. So I want to start with a story of a road trip that happened back in 1995. That was probably before a lot of you were conscious. But in 1995, my husband and I were on a cross-country road trip, and we were on the final leg, and it started in southeastern Utah, and it was going to go up into northwestern Utah, about 8-hour drive. And we wanted to get home. We were tired, and so we said, let's just drive through the night. Let's just drive through the night. And my husband grew up in Utah, and I said, I'm awake, you're sleepy, I'll drive, but if I get confused or something, can I wake you up to get navigational advice? So remember, this is 1995. GPS was a paper map. And this was Utah, like North Dakota. There's only a few places where you can turn, and then you're committed. You're committed for a long time. And so I thought, okay, there's only a couple of opportunities for me to mess this up. I'm pretty sure I can handle this. And so my husband snuggled up in the back seat with the paper map safely folded next to him in the back seat. And we were off. And I knew that I knew the town where the turnoff was, the main turnoff was. But hours had gone by, and I was in my own head, and so I said, okay, when we get to that town, when we get to Green Valley, do I go north, or do I stay on the main interstate and keep going west? And I thought, okay, I could pull out the map, turn off the light, pull over, and turn on the light and pull over, and make everything take longer, or I can just ask. He said I could ask. I'm just going to ask. So I said, hey, Kenny, we're about ready to come up to the turnoff. Should I go north, or should I stay on the freeway? And as clearly as I'm speaking to you right now, he said, no, go north. Stay on the freeway. Don't go north. Stay on the freeway. And I said, okay, I can do that. Should I get gas here, or should I just keep going? He said, no, we have plenty of time, plenty of gas to get us into the Provo Valley. Just keep going. Okay. So I keep going in full confidence. You know, the local told me where to go. So I'm driving, and I'm driving, and I'm driving. A couple hours go by. I'm like, okay, I thought there were towns between where we were and where we're headed. I'm not seeing towns. And as the night progressed and the temperature started to drop and the elevation started to go up, it starts to snow. And I thought, this doesn't seem right, but I just thought, oh, I'm just going to power through. Utah has lots of mountains. I just probably forgot. So I kept going. And as the sun started to come up, I'm thinking, pretty soon we're going to hit Provo Valley. Pretty soon we're going to hit Provo Valley. And I see a green sign coming through the snow, you know. And I said, okay, good. It'll tell me how far I have till Provo Valley. It doesn't say Provo Valley. It just says Joseph 6. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had ever been in a town called Joseph, I'd remember. And I did not remember a town called Joseph. So this was the first time in I don't know how many hours that I finally pulled over, turned on the light, and pulled out the map and unfolded it, and I started scanning for Joseph. Joseph. So I thought I was up in, about ready to be in the middle of northwestern Utah, and what I really ended up being was here, 6 miles from a little town called Joseph up in the mountains, 3 hours north of the Arizona border, in what was now a full-blown blizzard. I had no coat, we had no food. We were 6 miles away, and it was not looking pretty. It was one of those, I don't know, for those of you who are on TikTok, surprise, 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 surprise. It was one of those. I'm going to freeze frame. I'm not going to tell you how amazing I looked in the next frame of the story. It was not pretty. But this is how we discovered that my husband has a unique gift. He can sound completely awake while he's in a dead coma. That was how we found out. And so I tell you this story because you are becoming leaders in a really interesting time in the world. 10, 15, 20 years ago, leadership theory, leadership practices, they really assumed that leaders were going to be the ones who decided what changes were going to happen. And your job was to help minimize people's resistance and try to increase the amount of people who bought in. But more and more, the biggest changes that people face at home, at work, at school, in your personal life, in your professional life, even your career path, the biggest changes that you're going to face are often unexpected, unplanned, unwanted, and not negotiable. You don't have a choice. You can get to vote. And if COVID, the whole lockdown situation taught us anything, it is that no matter how hard you try to prepare, you launch out and you say, okay, we have a plan, we have a map, we have a destination, we have goals, we have benchmarks, we have contingencies, we have resources, we have experts, and you launch out. And somewhere along the way, whether or not you could have predicted it, and whether or not you could have stopped it, you discover that where you are is not where you thought you were going to be. And something happened that disrupted the plot. And you are now on a trajectory that was not included on any of your contingencies. And you are wondering what to do. So I can tell you, I can promise you, if you are going to be leading ever, there are going to be moments where you are standing up at the front and everybody is looking at you, and you have to announce changes that you don't want any more than anybody else, but it has to happen. They look more like hurricanes than they do grand openings or restructures. And so if you cannot prevent unpredictable sweeping change, it's just going to happen. What can you do? We need a different kind of leadership because you can't plan away, you can't contingency away, you can't formula away the reality that there are going to be things that you cannot expect and that you don't want, but they're still going to happen. So the only other option is to become unsinkable. We talked about this with the people at lunch. If you've ever looked at a buoy, you know what I'm talking about, those buoys? They float at the top of, I live in Virginia Beach, and so we have buoys around the bay and different areas, and no matter how hard something were to push down on it, it floats back up to the top. If a storm happens, it guaranteed is not going to sink. But the other thing that you can know about a buoy is that it doesn't leave. It stays put, because down deep below the surface, it's anchored into the rock. And so what can we do to be unsinkable? We've got to learn how to find the things that are true no matter what. Have you identified the things in your life that are true no matter what? Where do you find those? You find them in the darkest seasons of your life, in the things that you can't predict, that you can't stop. And if you can find anything light that's flickering in that moment, if it's light there, it can shine anywhere. So you've got to find the things that are true no matter what. And you also need to figure out what kind of a person you want to be no matter what. And so those are the things that you need to kind of adopt into your own life in order to become unsinkable. So I want to transition into, these are the results to a live poll that we did this afternoon at lunch. The first question that we asked was, what unavoidable changes do you think about the most? I don't know if you can see this very clearly, but I will make sure that Dr. Hunt has the slides, so if anybody wants to look more closely at these, you can. But some of the big ones, what do you see? Death, relationships, aging, others, marriage, adulting, career, relationship, graduating college, schedule changes, job out of college, personal finances, moving away, all kinds of things. Is there anything that you can think of that's not on this list that you would add? Now let's look at the next question. What thoughts, feelings, or perceptions do you have when you think about these unavoidable changes? Now, I notice I didn't say what terrible changes are on your mind. Some of you are excited about the changes that are coming for you. But have you noticed that most of the things that are on this list were scary things? And so what do you have? Anxiety, scared, anxious, sadness, confused, happy. You have worried, excited, dread, fearful, stress. So when you're looking at these things and you know they're coming, you don't know when, you don't know exactly how, but you know they're coming. Sometimes those changes are the scariest, not because of the thing itself necessarily, but because of your powerlessness to stop it. And you don't know when it's going to. Sometimes it feels like it's hiding behind the corner, just waiting for the most inopportune moment to just pounce out and get you. You know, and you don't want to be caught vulnerable. You don't want to be caught off guard and blindsided by something. So being aware of what you're thinking and feeling when you're facing those big changes, it's important. But how you respond is even more important. How you're framing that thing that's coming at you, and how you respond. So let's look at some of these. There's such a wide variety of responses here. Talking, crying, courage, breathe, prayer, cry, talk, talking it through, talk to people around me. There's a whole lot of talking going on here. Trust, draw, spend time with friends, fellowship with other people. Don't respond. There's somebody telling the truth. Drink, I see, okay? Somebody's keeping it real. Avoidance, okay? So many things. Bravery. That's what happens when you tell people it's going to be completely anonymous, right? So, hey, what you know. And if you're thinking, oh man, if I'm going to have to face that kind of stuff as a leader, I'm not going to lead. Great news. No matter what you do, you're going to have to face unavoidable changes. It's part of the human experience. You cannot avoid it. And you cannot avoid suffering. It's just part of life. So what you got to focus on is what you can do. What you can do. And you can figure out what you can do by remembering what is true no matter what. Who you want to be and who you are no matter what. And relating to everything from there. So I'm going to start with where we all start, plan A. You know what you think of when you think of your plan A? What are you going to do with your life? Do you have an image in your mind of the career you're going to have, the kind of house you're going to live in? When I was a kid, we had in the 80s, we had these little things called click-clacks. Tick, 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 tick. Oh, you're going to be married to a, whatever, and you're going to be a circus performer, and you're going to whatever. Oh, that's my future. We have these things in our minds. But as a leader, you're going to hear plan A has to be research-based. You got to do your homework. You got to figure out what the data is, collect the data, do your analysis, do your homework, and come up with a plan that has benchmarks and make sure that you involve lots of people, lots of experts who can give you all kinds of good advice. Well, in my life, our plan A culminated in a hot, stuffy office in Kiev, Ukraine in 2005. And we were sitting down looking through notebooks, hoping to meet who would become our son. What we didn't expect in that moment, after years of planning, what we didn't expect is that, there's unrest in Ukraine. There had been unrest right before we got there. And they informed us when we sat down that because of restructuring among the orphanages, that at the moment, the only children that were available that were young had serious medical issues. That was when we found out. And I cannot describe to you the panic and that sense of, did I miss it this bad? We were 12 years married by this point. I had everything planned out. I knew exactly all the things that we were supposed to do. And here we were in this moment. I'm looking over at my husband, who's changing different shades of green and gray, flipping through notebooks, just trying to figure out what to do. And I felt so guilty and so embarrassed and so panicked, and there was nobody that I could call. And I just had this moment where I thought, what if I didn't blow it? What if this isn't all a huge mistake? What if plan A is still here and I just don't recognize it? And I prayed the most terrifying prayer that I have prayed in my life. And it was this: God, none of the kids in these notebooks looks anything like what we thought. But if he's here, I need your help. I need your help to see him with your eyes. I need your help to see past the diagnosis, to see the person. And I started over in the notebook that I had. It was like a 3-ring binder with those plastic covers. And I just started looking at every child, praying over every child. Help me to see, help me to see. Well, the first time that I had seen the picture of who's now our son, I was freaked out by the picture because you've seen uncorrected cleft lips before, right? So he didn't have a front lip, but out of that lip, there was protruding, his upper jaw came down and it was resting on his chin. And he was smiling, and so the little pieces of lip that he did have were kind of peeled back. And it was just too much. I didn't know what I was looking at. And so it scared me. And so I turned the page really quickly. After I had prayed that prayer, and I got back to this picture, something compelled me to just take my thumb and cover up that little spot on his mouth. And in that moment, something miraculous happened. I made room for God to help me see him. And I saw these beautiful, big brown eyes that looked alive. And I noticed that he was kind of reaching. And then I took my thumb off and I realized whatever was going on, I didn't know what the diagnosis was. I didn't know what was going on. But he was smiling. And I thought, I think I can see you. And I remember pulling that thing out and saying, what can you tell me about this child? And my husband said, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. What can you tell me about this child? And so they started talking. And so seeing in that moment gave me the ability, just in that moment, to at least get curious about what was possible. Curious, not committed, but just curious. What's possible here? And we made room for something that I could not have imagined until that moment. And in that moment, we both made a decision that we were going to allow the possibility that plan A was not missed, that we weren't in some kind of crazy plan C or plan D, but that this was plan A. And about 48 hours later, we were in another office, and we were crying again. But this time we were crying because we had met the little boy who would become our son. 26 pounds, wearing size 18-month clothing at 3. And we fell so hard in love. And there were so many unknowns. So many unknowns. For us, we were not equipped. We had no idea. We didn't know how many surgeries it was going to be before we were to the other side. We didn't know what kind of therapies he was going to need till we were to the other side. We didn't know if he was going to be able to talk. We didn't know how much we were going to be able to do. How big is he going to get? You know, there were so many unknowns, and we felt so small and so insignificant. And he had unknowns too. He spent his entire life in an orphanage belonging to nobody, owning nothing. And here are these two strangers that he had to give an opportunity to. So many unknowns. But we made a decision, all of us made a decision to let each other in and to make room for something that we could never have dreamed and never thought we wanted. And it became, because we made room, it became the path, the best path that we never knew we always wanted. And we started a journey to become. Every single one of us needed courage. Not just me and my husband, but my son. And courage can give you the ability to extend belonging before fit exists. Belonging is not fit. There was nothing about that little boy who fit us. His diet, his lifestyle, his sense of self, his understanding of the world, his language, his entire world did not fit in our entire world. But he chose to let us in. And we chose to let him in. Belonging says, yeah, I see the gap. I mean, can you see what I see when you look at this picture? You see the willingness to embrace each other, to let each other in. But you can also see that there's some work that needs to be done, can't you? And love does not say, you're good. You're good. There's nothing wrong with you. No, it says, I love you. I accept you. And we've got some work to do because we love you. So we let each other in, and he made himself willing to trust people when he had no context for loving parents, no context for family, no context for belonging up into that moment. And we let him in. Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes, and he said, love is not a state of perfect caring. It's an active noun like struggle. To love someone is to strive to accept that person exactly the way he or she is right here and now. It's a struggle to strive to accept another human being, to look them in the face and say, you matter. And I accept you as a human being, as the person that you are right here and right now. And the more we have that belonging, the more we know that we're wanted, the more that we know that we are accepted as the human being that we are, the more, not the less, but the more we can hear the truth about what we need to fix. Because it's not a rejection. It's a statement of care. Say, I see you. I see who you can become. I love you right now. I love you no matter what. But because I love you, we're going to climb this mountain together, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to be hard. And he had the power to extend that to us because we had to become a different kind of person to raise this person. He had to extend that to us, and we had to extend that to him. Leadership often sounds like a big production. I've seen corporate leadership speakers who are more polished than I will ever dream of being. I know, I'm pretty polished. I'm pretty. People think of me as the polished girl, you know. I see people that are more polished than I will ever be, that have figured out how to say things in a way that sounds so sleek and so shiny, and you look at them and you can say, I could never be that. Leadership gets down eye level, and it sees the person in front of them and says, you matter. You matter. You are welcome in my life. And we need to choose to enter into this struggle to get to the highest form of who we could ever be. We need to commit to believing that it's, and to commit our whole life to that struggle. That includes yourself. Sometimes the hardest person to you to enter into the struggle with is yourself. I don't know about you, but the cruelest things that have ever escaped my lips were not said to another person. They were said to me when I was looking in the mirror. We can be so brutal to ourselves. What if you got to be a human being that is just as worthy of care as all the other people that you extend it to? What if you really believed that you were deeply loved by your Creator and had innate value, whether anybody in the room gives you permission to be valuable? How would you engage with the world differently if you believed that? If nobody gave you permission, but you believed it because you just knew it, it was true no matter what. How would that change the way that you treated other people? So, yes, learn all the theories. Learn how to create a beautiful environment. Learn how to be impressive. Learn how to be polished. Learn how to make a plan. But good, courageous leadership, unsinkable leadership, takes it a step further. And it looks at every person who walks into the room and sees all the beauty. And it helps them to discover that they have a seat at the table, that you were waiting for them. And they can look down and see not just that there's room for them, but there was a seat for them with their name in calligraphy on the plate. When people know, do you know what people need more than anything else in times of crisis and disruption and confusion? Do you know what they need more than anything else? They need to know that they matter. They need to know that there's a purpose for their existence and that there's something worth knowing, something that they can contribute, something that they can do. And what they say, what they think, and what they do is having an impact. It's sending ripples. That's what belonging, extending belonging can do to somebody. And so right here and right now, before you're a leader, whether you are classified as in-group or out-group, you have, because you are a human being, you have innate value and you have the capacity to extend belonging. Even if nobody has given you permission. So if you're on the outside, you're on the fringe, and you're feeling awkward and cringy and vulnerable, here's what I recommend that you do. Look for people who look like you feel. Where are the other awkward, cringy, vulnerable people? I'm going to go extend belonging to them. Don't wait for permission. You already have value no matter what. So that's the first thing. You've got to be able to, in order to extend that kind of belonging before there's fit, there's one thing that you've got to be able to do. You've got to accept the people in the room and accept the people that you're leading and accept the situation as it is right now. Not the situation that you wanted, not the people that you wanted to lead, not the people that you were leading in your mind and you're angry that it didn't flow the way that you thought, but the people that you are with right now, and you got to commit yourself to let them in and to let them let you in. The next thing that you need to do is make room for truth, the whole truth, the uncomfortable, cringy truth. And I'm not talking about walking around without a filter. We all know that guy, right? Don't be that. Whoa, that was your loud voice. We're not talking about Captain TMI, okay? We're talking about making room for whatever the hard situation is, to say the hard to say thing, to name the elephant in the room, to say what you're afraid of, to say what is reality as you know it, and welcome other people to tell you the truth too. There's this misnomer that just because a leader has to be the one, somebody has to be the one to take responsibility for a crisis or for a change, that therefore they are the gatekeepers of all knowledge. And it just kind of flows down, and they have to be careful how much they share with other people. But a leader may have big picture understanding that people on the front lines don't have. The people on the front lines have perspective on the front lines that the leader does not have. The people that you will lead are smart. And you need their perspectives in order to have the whole truth. And they need your perspective in order to have the truth that they need in order to deal with whatever they're going to have to face. So many leaders refuse to tell people the whole truth about a change that is unavoidable for two reasons. The first one is this: it's unavoidable. They can't stop it. And so they don't want to tell the truth until the last minute because they're scared that they're going to get resistance and nobody gets a vote, including the leader. It just has to happen. So, and I've seen this in large organizations and small organizations and public sector and private sector, in every kind of organization, with men leaders and women leaders and every generation of leaders, this tendency to be afraid to tell the whole truth, because all hell will break loose and you won't be able to contain it. And so what do? They hold their breath. They'll announce that a big change is coming, but then they'll hold their breath until just enough time to do a slipshod job of getting things put into place. And so then people find out, you knew? You knew the whole time and you didn't tell us? Why did you wait until a week before? Why did you wait until a month before when we needed 6 months to do this right? And that feels like betrayal. And now that leader who needs their trust in that moment now has lost trust and credibility. Because telling the whole truth is an act of trust. It's saying, I believe you can handle what I'm about ready to tell you. I believe that if I tell you the truth as it impacts you, not everything, but the truth as it impacts you, that we can face it better together because you know what the front lines look like better than I do. And I'm going to make room for you to tell me what it looks like from there. And that is an empowering act. It's an act of trust. Another thing that leaders have a hard time doing is letting other people tell them the truth. Making room for the whole truth is not just about how much you give. It's about being humble enough to recognize you don't hold all the cards on truth. And so not only does it mean telling your team the way you see it, as much as it impacts them, and giving them an opportunity to hear so that they can make adjustments, but it's also welcoming their input and their perspectives. Sometimes you also need to ask people on the outside of the circle for help to know the whole truth. When we were a year in and 4 surgeries down, we finally were in another office with a surgeon who was telling us the date when Victor's jaw was going to get put into his mouth. He lived in the United States, and they had to do all kinds of other things, close his palate, redo his lip, all kinds of other things before they could get his jaw into his mouth. And so, it's going to take this many surgeons, it's going to take this many hours, it's going to take all these different pieces, moving pieces. And we're listening, and we're just so excited because we know that life as we know it is going to change. But we also wanted to know, how long is this process? And so we listened, and then my husband said, how much longer until we're done? How many surgeries? And the surgeon said, we can't know what's next until we see what happens from this surgery. And after that one, we'll figure out what happens and what we can do next. But as far as being done, yeah, I imagine you'll have a party and invite me, and it'll be a big to-do on his 21st birthday. And we looked down at our son. He was 4. And kind of our hearts stopped for a second. And he said, no, listen, this is an act of care, what happened next. He said, you guys need to exhale. Stop holding your breath for things to go back to normal. They're not going to go back to normal. This is your life now. This is your life, not something else, not everybody else's life. This is your life. Figure out how to live. Now, exhale, take a deep breath, figure out how to live. And so that was an act of care. He needed to tell us what we should expect. How many of you have been on a plane recently? I've been on several recently. A couple years ago, we were on a plane, and while we were on our way, it was supposed to be a long flight, we started noticing that we were landing. And I am not kidding you, I smelled genuine, we're going to make s'mores now, smoke on the plane. That's not the smell that you want to smell. Please say somebody's burning a fireside candle. No. And the pilot came on very calmly and said, we have a malfunction. We have located an airstrip. It's a real airport, because it was in the middle of nowhere. It's a real airport. You're going to be fine. And he just, as calmly, and he said, it might be a little bit bumpy of a landing, but you're going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. If he had not said anything, I just want you to imagine, what if he said, I know they smell smoke, and I know we're landing, and we're not in New York City, we're in Podunkville, Pennsylvania. Something that was small enough for him to need to say, yeah, we're in a real airport. His words impacted how the whole plane responded. He set the expectation. He told the truth, and he said things that we did not want to hear. But what would have been worse if he said, this is going to really upset people. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Let's just goose it, and we'll just land, and we'll clean up the mess later. That would not have gone well. And there was a study that was done a few years ago that looked at pilots who said, ladies and gentlemen, we are about ready to experience turbulence. It will be pretty bumpy. Make sure your seatbelt is buckled. And it'll be about 20 minutes, but then we'll be on the other side of it. I'll let you know when we're about to be ready. Now, the turbulence is unpleasant, right? But they compared that to pilots who just said, I don't want to say anything. We'll just power through. What happens? What do you think happened to the people in the planes where there was no announcement? They got scared. Does the pilot know what he's doing? Is this his first time? Is he playing what does this button do? Are we going to die? Is this a thunderstorm? Where's the exit? Does it matter that this seat will be used as a flotation device if I'm over the desert? All these scary thoughts would go through your head. But if you know that it's going to be turbulence and how long it is, then you can set that expectation even though it's an unpleasant conversation, and you can keep rolling, right? And so leaders need to tell the whole truth to give people an opportunity to adapt. That make sense? I was working with a bank, a global bank, and I'm going to tell you about letting other people tell you how things are affecting them. There was a restructure, and there was a team of IT guys that had one service that they provided globally, and it was using a software that was about 30 years old. And this team had been the same team for all those 30 years. And so as technology evolved, there increased bugs. And so each person on this team had a comp book. You guys know what a comp book is, right? And just a handwritten comp book. And each person picked a different bug. And over the years, they had workarounds. And so people would call from all over the world to get they knew which person to get the workarounds for the fix for the bug that they needed. And so they were a highly respected team. They've been doing this for decades, but this was a kind of a bad model, because these guys were gonna retire, and they were the only ones with the secret sauce, for the fix. And so the bank had to come up with a better solution. So they hired somebody to build a new software program to do the same thing. And then they hired the implementation team to come in and say, hey, your job hasn't changed, but we just have a new platform, so you're not going to need your comp books anymore. Isn't that great? You're not going to have any of these bugs anymore. Here's how it sounded to this team. Hey, guys, great news. 2 years before you retire, you know those comp books that you've spent your entire career curating? In about 2 weeks, you'll be able to send those through the shredder, because this young kid who just graduated from college is going to come teach you how to do your job in a completely disorienting, streamlined new way. But other than that, nothing has changed. So the team lead came to the implementation leader, and he said, look, we can see this as an important change. Of course we're going to do it. It just feels like you're asking us to come to work in somebody else's clothes. What do you think they meant by that? Do you think it had to do with they didn't like the software? It had nothing to do with the software. And it was important for the implementation team to understand that this wasn't about the software. This was about their sense of meaning and contribution and what they had done their whole lives and what gave them a sense of meaning and purpose in this job. It was like, they said, it was like their fingerprints were being erased. So as you're leading, it is so important for you to learn how to listen to the impact of the change. You can't stop big changes from happening, but if you pay attention to how it's affecting you and how it's affecting the people around you, then you can change the conversation to what do you need right now and what can we do about it, and help people walk through the process. The next thing that you can do is to reduce uncertainty through imagination. We talked about this just a little bit this afternoon. Imagination is incredibly powerful. It's way more powerful than willpower, because our minds can't stop thinking about what if, right? If it's unknown, we just go there. Like all the worst possible things that could happen, we can just think about it. What if, as a leader, you took up the challenge to help people channel their imagination to positive what ifs? This is how we did this with our son. We would tell him, hey, you're going to have another surgery. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to cut open your ear, and they're going to take stuff out of your ear and use it to build up your nose, and then they're going to sew you all up, and you're going to have tubes in your nose, and it's going to be really painful. And we let him process, and then we said, all right, we had a little doctor kit, and we took turns for a few weeks when he was little. You be the patient, I'll be the dad, you be the doctor. And we went through the whole process, and then we would trade roles. And we'd do the whole process, and then we'd trade roles. What were we doing? He was becoming familiar with something that hadn't happened yet. He was figuring out what he could do at every phase, from before we go in and when he had to fast before the surgery, to the surgical procedure itself, to the recovery and how long it was going to take and how long he was going to hurt. And we would practice. Whoever was the person who just woke up would, be in pain, and the other people would comfort him. And so he got familiar, using his imagination, he got familiar with something that he couldn't stop. And he got a chance to practice being brave before he needed to. What if you gave people an opportunity to be honest about the impact, and then whatever you did know about a change that's coming up, you gave them a chance to practice, to role play, to ask the what if questions and say, okay, what if that happened? Let's talk about it. What would we do? Let's make a plan. So the more you do that, the more you engage people's imagination, the more they can feel empowered, and the more practice they can have at channeling that imagination into somewhere constructive so that they don't feel helpless and anxious. Because nobody is at their best when they feel helpless and anxious. The more that we can be sure of what is within our power and what is true no matter what, the more able we are to face anything. I love Michelangelo's work. When you look at his carvings, they look like they're alive. It looks like the material could ruffle in the wind. It looks like the people could be breathing. And Michelangelo said, all of my subjects are complete and whole, and they're trapped in the marble. I just set them free with my chisel. That sounds so poetic, doesn't it? I just set them free with my chisel. Obviously my story has made me think a lot about different things. And there's a scripture that St. Paul said that people who have committed their life to Christ are adopted by God, and that they are being conformed into the image of his Son. So that means that, I just want you to imagine, whatever your background is, what if a loving, passionate God looks at you and he sees a complete, beautiful work trapped in marble? And what if every disruption that happens in your life could be used to chisel away the things that are in the way? Or as Michelangelo called it, chisel away the superfluous material. What if everything that came in your way could be used to chisel away what you don't need without chiseling away anything that's essential? This does not look like a friendly instrument if you imagine it on you, does it? Chiseling things away. And when we see big changes coming at us, it looks like it's going to do nothing but hurt us. And oftentimes, initially, all we feel is pain. I guarantee that there are going to be times when you are going through what feels like fire, when it feels like you are going through the storm, that there is nothing that you could do to survive. It feels like you're getting chiseled away. What if, at any given moment, plan A, even though this is not what you recognize, what if it's still available right now, wherever you are? It just doesn't look like what you thought. What if you could just lean in to the work of that chisel and let it do its good work, and to cut off the things that are not necessary, to leave the masterpiece that God, when he conceived of you, the only you that will ever exist in the universe, all the superfluous material could be chipped away without chipping away anything that you need for later. And I want to call out the artist in every one of you. Someday you're going to be a parent or a leader or an influencer or a coach or a role model. You're going to be something. And you're going to need every fire that you go through now, every chiseling experience that you go through now, to become the person that you can be, so that you can look around at the people around you that are entrusted into your care, those blocks of marble, and see the beautiful, complete version that they could be, and to stand with them and come alongside them in their storm and carefully guide that chisel in its work. You got to use such great care. You've got to use such great care because you're going to be guiding people across a chasm into the unknown that will either look completely devastating, crushing, and unsurvivable, or terrifying and daunting and hard but doable, depending on the words that you use. Use great care. I want you to imagine that right here and right now, there are people in your life that you can be shaping for good just by letting them in and by seeing them and telling them with your words and with your actions that what they say, what they think, and what they do matter, that they're worth the struggle. That includes the person that you're looking at in the mirror. If you just do that, you're worth the struggle. You're worth knowing. You are worth loving, and you are capable of love. We're just telling people that. And telling them that you're making room for the truth to happen in your midst. So you're telling the truth as it affects them and as they can handle it, and you're giving them a chance to tell you the truth. You're letting other voices in to help you to see the blind spots that you don't have. And you're harnessing imagination for the good, and you're making room for plan A to still be here, even if it doesn't look like what you thought. What if plan A never leaves? Life, every life in this room is sprinkled with loss. Life is a series of loss, one loss after another. Growth is loss. Success is loss. Becoming is loss. You have to shed what you don't want to be anymore. You have to shed your past way of thinking and your past way of being to become what you're meant to be. We had no idea how much loss, how much suffering we were going to have to go through together. But one thing that we knew when we adopted our son is that we could not protect him from pain. We never had that illusion. And I think that put us at an advantage, because then all we could do is say, hey, here it comes. Let's get ready. What can we do? What can you do? And so I want you to think about this. You cannot protect yourself from pain. And the more you avoid that, the more you are jinxing your opportunity to become who you're meant to be. Because there is no becoming without the chisel. There's no becoming without the fire. And if you don't lean in, it will destroy you. You'll become bitter. You'll become angry. You'll become just withdrawn from the world and feel helpless and anxious all the time. But if you say, I don't know, I can't, there are so many unknowns, I don't even know what to do with it. But here's what I know. Take some time, get a little journal, and just write down, what do you know for sure? That's true no matter what. Who do you want to be no matter what? And in your circle, your current circle where you live, what tiny things can you do that make things better and not worse? That make things a little less confusing and a little more clear for yourself? What voices do you choose to listen to? And for other people, who can you just stand next to so they don't have to stand alone in their awkward, in their vulnerable moment? When you lean in, I promise you, plan A keeps changing shape. And it will always require your imagination. It will always require your willingness to be vulnerable enough to make room for things that you never thought of to become a different, best plan. And it's okay to grieve the things that will never be, that you thought were going to happen and didn't happen. It's okay for you to grieve those things and still give yourself permission to hope that things can be good, a different, completely different good that you never knew could be possible, that you never knew you always wanted. So I want to encourage all of you. We're going to have Q&A. I'll stay as long as you want me to stay. But I want to encourage all of you that have not participated in this poll, if you want to. We're going to leave this up. And we'll get fresh results to Dr. Hunt. But if you have not had an opportunity, I want to give you a chance. It's totally anonymous for you to add your voice. What are you afraid of? What do you think about? What changes do you think about most? When you think about those changes, what are your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions? And how do you respond? And I want to add this, it's not on the poll. How do you want to respond? Before you go to bed tonight, I want you to write down one thing that you know is true no matter what. And one thing that you know you want to be no matter what. Because that little step, and then add to the list. Be looking for meaning. Look for ways to close to heal the brokenness and to close the gaps and to reduce confusion. And that clarity will start to come. Let Plan A evolve and just keep moving with it. That's all I got. Thanks.
What was your most prevalent leadership moment outside of the adoption of your son?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you one of my pivotal leadership formation moments. It was my first residency at Regent University when I was a PhD, feeling completely unworthy. I was having flashbacks. I was from California, and I was at Regent it's the East Coast, fancy school, and I felt so Legally Blonde, like the old version of Legally Blonde, the old geeky version of Legally Blonde, and so I was feeling very. One of these things is not like the others, and just trying to act normal, like I can do this. I'm not stupid, I'm just special. And I had somebody in the lunch line. Well, let me back up. In our first auditorium meeting, it was said, "Look around in this room. Half of you will be gone before the next residency." And then he said, "The next residency, half again. And then the third residency, if you've made it that far, you'll probably make it." And I was, that's pretty scary. And we were in lunch line after that conversation, and I was just thinking about that a lot. And I was being my gregarious self. I know it's hard for you to imagine that I would be my gregarious self, but I was being my gregarious self in the line. And a guy turned around and he looked at me and he said, "You're the kind of person who's going to not make it through the first year." And I thought, what if he read me? What if he just saw right through me and that's true? And then I had to wait a minute. He doesn't get to say that about me. He doesn't know me. And but it still really shook me. And I was telling a girl that I was sitting next to in the next thing, because if you were in the group with me at lunchtime, I said, you got to name the thing. You got to name whatever the thing is, and let somebody safe help you process the thing, because it just keeps getting bigger in your own head if you don't name it. And so I was telling her, and she said, "MaryJo, some people are not going to be able to handle it, that you're just real. You just keep coming and showing up and be you. And let that be your answer." That guy didn't make it through the first year. And I tried not to. So that was one. There was another one that happened much earlier. In fact, I was probably the age of a lot of you. I was maybe 19, 20 when it happened. I'm trying to think. I was 20. And I was on a trip we had spent the summer in Romania helping build a playground for an orphanage. And then we were exhausted afterward, and we went to rest in Austria. And before we went on that outreach, in the springtime we had training as a team. and we kind of bonded as a team, and I felt like I belonged on the team. I was, everybody was different, everybody had their little characters, but I felt like I was understood, and people had let me in. We laughed at each other's jokes, all the things. But when we got to Romania, there was a new person on the team that was not in the training, and she was a very polished, well thought through, dignified, beautiful girl. Like all the things, when I would look at her, I'd think, man, I wish I could be like her, and I noticed that she seemed to have a hard time being around me. And I also started noticing as the weeks went by that whatever I said, more and more, the people that were hanging around with her would interpret, how things can be taken more than one way? And they would always take whatever I said the worst possible way. And it was as if they had decided in advance that they were going to be offended by anything that came out of my mouth. But I just kept thinking, okay, we're all just tired, And I wasn't I wasn't doing anything irritating that, intentionally. But I just kept rolling. And when we got to Austria, we were in an area where there was a Holocaust museum not very far away. And so on one of our days off, they were like, oh, let's go. Who wants to go to the Holocaust Museum? I got really excited because how many opportunities are you going to have to do something like that? And it got kind of awkwardly quiet after I said, oh, that's amazing. When are we going? And a guy who had been my buddy before this person, we'll call her Carrie because that was her name. You're never going to meet her. Anyway, before Carrie, we were buddies, And so he came to me and he said, hey, Joe, I have a favor to ask. I said, sure, what? And he said, can you not go on the trip? And I said, why? And he said, well, Carrie wants to have a good time. And and she just feels like she'll be too irritated if you basically exist in her radius. He didn't put it that way. And my first thought was kind of what your face looks like right now. Like, first of all, how dare you? No, first of all, my thought was, what kind of a monster am I that somebody could dislike me so badly that going to something as profoundly moving as a Holocaust museum, like my presence, my being within 100 feet of her would ruin that moment, like what kind of an ogre am I, That was, obviously I didn't say that out loud. My second thought was, okay, now I really can't go because that's every flavor of awkward. I'm not going to be, like, and I'm also not going to avoid her, And so within a few flashes, a few seconds, I just responded and said, yeah, I won't go. And he was like, thanks. And he left. And I was just devastated. But I had to name the thing. I had to find somebody safe to process this with. And so I went to talk to the director of the team. And I told him what happened. And he said, Joe, I'm going to tell you something that will help you for the rest of your life if you receive it from me. And I said, okay. And he said, you have a gift. I said, aw. He said, yeah, you do. You have the gift of making people feel uncomfortable. And I was like, that's the stupidest gift I ever heard of in my life. I don't want it. And he said, no, listen. He said, listen, when you walk into the room, you might have noticed this. When you walk into the room, people are going to be challenged or inspired or shocked, confused, disoriented, irritated, overstimulated, Any number of those things. And it's your job to do everything that you can to channel your gift for the good. Do everything that you can to take that gift of making people feel uncomfortable and help them to use it to be inspired, challenged, want to grow, and maybe even give them permission to be awkward too, and don't intentionally do anything that will irritate or overstimulate people. That's just going to be your lifelong challenge, to be careful not to overstimulate people and to care about how you're coming off. He said, I have the opposite gift of you. He said, I have the gift of making people feel comfortable. But don't think for a second that's a better gift. He said, I have a lifelong struggle because if I don't channel my gift for the good, people will feel so comfortable that we'll get nothing done. We'll just be so happy and so cozy and so comfortable that we won't ever challenge anybody's thinking, we won't ever grow, and we won't be stimulated to go higher. So he said, guess what I do? I said, what? And he said, I intentionally surround myself with people who have your gift. Because I need people who have the gift of making people feel uncomfortable. And he said, as you grow, he said, you're all so young, you're 19, you're 20, no, I just turned 20. You're 20, and I was about ready to get engaged. He said, when you get married, and, after a while, you balance each other out over time, But your gift is your gift. And he said, here's what you need to know. Your challenge is to keep that submitted to God and channel it for good. But if you've done everything that you can to show care and to channel it to help empower other people, inspire other people, challenge other people, and people still, when they see you, they get the heck out of the room and don't want to be around you, then you just need to tell yourself, I'm gifted. That's my gift right there. See that? That was my gift. And honestly, it was worth that horrible, devastating experience for that conversation. It was a life-changing conversation because I'm gifted. And it helped me to, as I've grown, I'm 51 now, and, when I started doing, public speaking, there are a lot of unspoken rules about what it's like to keynote and how you need to be. And the stereotype, I will never be that girl. And even, I'll just even come out and say, even thinking about what I was going to wear, I was like, okay, who are we kidding? I'm a little bit crazy. And so I need to just go with it, and give people permission to be where they're at, but as an act of care, say, look, you can make yourself smaller, not to make yourself lovable, but as an act of care for people that are genuinely overstimulated by too much. And so that's been my lifelong challenge as a leader, to help people to feel welcome and to say, let's be authentic. I'll go first. But to also know where the lines are, and to know when people's eyes are glazing over, or they're like, "Oh, should we be scared? Should we be? Are we turned off? Does that make sense?" And so I think that even though those were before I had big opportunities, they were two of the most pivotal moments of my life, because they gave me an opportunity to choose a different voice in my head. Right? I could have said in that moment, holy cow, I am a monster. I can spend a month with somebody, or a month and a half with somebody, building a playground equipment for orphans, and they can so dislike who I am not to even be able to go to a Holocaust museum. Or I can say, wow, I have a lot of power. I have a lot of capacity. My presence can fill up any space if I let it. But that doesn't mean it has to fill up any space. and I can learn how to modulate myself as an act of care for other people, that's powerful. To know that I'm valuable. I don't have to not be who I am, but I'm also not going to be like all those social media advice that say, girl, you just be as big and the world will adjust. Sure, they'll adjust. They'll lock all their doors. They'll close all the shades, No, I want to figure out how to use whatever it is, for good. It kind of reminds me of the Incredibles, the cartoon, The Incredibles, when Flash was in that race at the end, and his dad is like, go, slow down, you don't want to win too much. Second's good, go second, good job, I'm so proud of you. To know that you don't have to be first to prove anything. You just have to be a force for good, and sometimes that force for good is to let other people shine instead of you all the time, and learning how to modulate. If we're going to tell introverts that they need to voice their opinions more, and it's okay to tell people that they need to speak up when that's counterintuitive for them, it also needs to be allowable to say, pipe it down, Chachi. It's a little much. The sleeping babies need to have their sleep, And so yeah, those are the big ones. I will say this. There was another pivotal moment. I think sometimes thinking outside of the box of what is possible. So I attended a workshop at the bank that I was talking about, for another consultant whose specialty was on communication. But we had talked, and I had said, I love helping people in disruption and change. I love helping people get ready in the messy stuff. And so he said, well, I'm just going to look for an opportunity, if there's ever an opportunity for me to recommend you. So I sat for 2 days just listening to him do his thing, and he was really good at what he did. And right before he finished his whole training, one of the executives at the bank raised her hand and said, okay, what if we did all the right things in communication about the change and people are still not ready? It was 5 minutes before we left, And he said, that sounds like a great question for Dr. Burchard. And all the heads turned and looked at me. And he said, you want to share a little bit? And so I shared, and people just took their notebooks and they started writing furiously. And then they called and they said, we want a contract with Dr. Burchard. And so I scheduled the first full day training with them, with their executive team for the changes that they had. That day ended up being the last day that they were in person before the whole national bank shut down for COVID. I felt like the last giraffe on the ark before the door shut miraculously, because they said, we're not letting anybody else in, and indefinitely everybody's going home. And they said, we need this so much that we're going to do this virtually with you. Well, there were 2 people missing in that group because they just went virtual a day early. And I had their complete set of all of their materials in my bag. And between that day and what I'm going to tell you next, there was a mass shooting in my city. And a number of people were killed in the municipal center, and it was done by an employee of the city. So it was ultimate betrayal, you think about all the things that you're supposed to do to hide, and all this stuff. He had a badge. He could go in, and he knew where all the hiding places were, it was a nightmare. And they had a year where they were in clinical healing, but then they realized not everything goes away just because you're going to therapy. When you go to work, you've got other issues that need to get worked out. And so they said they kept hearing in the conversation, we need a MaryJo. We need a MaryJo. And somebody said, well, why don't we hire the actual MaryJo? This is what she does. And so they called me, and I was like, okay, I don't have anything that's called trauma-informed, but I felt like I'm just going to take my purple bag, my bag that I had taken to the bank. And I was with a meeting that had 2 people. that were responsible for organizational recovery. And I reached into my Mary Poppins bag and I pulled out 2 full sets of the change readiness stuff from the bank. And I just, because of all the other things that I had been through up to that point, all the suffering that I had been through with other people and all that stuff, I could easily adjust the exact same materials to a trauma-informed change readiness and helping people to recover. And I just laid it out, and it was glossy, full color. It was like I totally had it planned. But I didn't. Someone did, but it wasn't me. And when I finished, the director of the program just started crying. And she said, "How are you here? How do you live here? We definitely need to hire you." And so I became the organizational recovery consultant for the city while they were walking through that stuff. And so I couldn't plan this stuff, It's making room. It's just being ready. It's saying, what kind of a person do I want to be? What kind of hole can I fill? What kind of gaps can I fill? How do I see people? And how can I help connect them to the truth that's different from other people? I'm going to focus on that and get really good at it, and then just look for ways where those windows open up. And so those pivotal moments are all about all the moments that don't count, all those mundane, faithful things where you're doing all the hard work and hashing out what you bring to the table, and just keep bringing it in tiny, tiny ways until you just realize that over and over again, because you've been faithful in it, it's turned into something that's called your voice. And then you turn around, and in a moment where you want so badly to have something in your hand, you reach into your bag and you magically have it. But it didn't appear magic. It appeared because you've been cultivating it the whole time. And so I just want to say that leadership ultimately is leaning into all the unknown and not being afraid to get in the sandbox and just play with your evolving future. Just get curious about it. Play with it. And, if God is creator, just think about this for a second. If and I know that not everybody has the same background, but if there is a God that has created you and we're made in his image, creativity is imaging him. It's showing. It's partnering with him to make something out of nothing. Just something that comes out of our head, something maybe that's beauty out of chaos, And so if you get into the sandbox with all the unknowns, just start playing with it. What if? And just start making room for it to surprise you. You will not believe what can emerge out of the fog that you couldn't have thought up, you couldn't have planned up. And the awesome thing is you don't have to have it planned out. If you have it planned out, you're wrong. You're probably wrong. You don't know where it's wrong, but I can guarantee part of it's wrong. But if you just think, what kind of a person am I supposed to be? And how am I supposed to contribute? Then you can't go wrong. Because every experience that you have is a learning experience that helps you to learn more what you're not, or more how to clarify what you are. And you just keep bringing it and finding whatever is broken and fixing it with whatever you have. Our family hashtag, I know that sounds really geeky that we have a family hashtag, but it's Unbreak the World. And so the whole concept is start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can do to find just any tiny broken thing, whether it's broken thinking in your own head, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you think, the voices that you listen to, or broken that you see how someone else is treating somebody else, and you don't even have to say anything, you just need to go stand next to them. Just unbreaking the broken things and letting that momentum roll down the hill until it has a momentum of its own. Yeah. Anybody else? You guys probably ready to go, but yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is weird talking into a mic. People in positions of power, CEOs and presidents of companies and coaches of teams, where do you, they hold obviously positional power. Where do you think the bad ones fall short in being a leader?
I think one of the big problems is that we conflate authority with leadership. Anybody can tell you to do something, and the people that are under their authority, if they are owning their ability, they're going to comply, right? That's not the same thing as cultivating. Leadership is doing something in a way that is contagious. That it's not just about, like when we first brought our son home, if he was in the orphanage, if he did something wrong, he'd get beaten, right? So he was very well behaved when we first brought him home. And people would say, oh, he's so obedient. And I'd say, no, he's not. He's compliant. And they'd say, what's the difference? And I'd say, once he understands that he has a choice, and he trusts us enough to choose to do what we tell him he needs to do because he believes that we want the best for him, that will be obedience. And so we had to walk him through those bumpy waters. And so when people, it's a lot faster to just have respect my authority, right? It's a lot faster to just tell people what to do and just don't think, just do, right? But that's not the same thing as leadership. And leadership requires a rumble because it's actually acknowledging that the other person has to be courageous and let you in. And you have to be authentic enough to let them in enough that you're becoming contagious. So you're not pushing them along anymore. You're pulling them along because they want to be like what you are. And does that make sense? So I would say that's where the shortfall is. They're taking a shortcut. It's always easier to just tell people what to do. Don't ask why. And you can do that. But what you also forfeit as a follower, what you forfeit is critical thinking, right? If all you do is comply, when that voice is gone, you don't have a voice to tell you what to do. And then you're like, I don't know. Who's going to tell me what to do? I don't know what to do. And so a leader is actually working their way out of a job because they are trying to help you to cultivate a voice in your own head that will emulate the highest and best that they saw in the leader that they wanted to be like. Makes sense? So it takes a lot longer to be a trusted leader. But you're also developing the whole person, not just a skill. You're not just nobody in this room, whether it's on a sports team or in a corporation, is a role with legs. You are a human being that has a whole lot more to offer than just your skill. And so you can still choose. If somebody is being an authoritarian person to you, you can still grow personally by recognizing that and courageously taking what you can and choosing to comply. But just recognize that there's a difference between that and leadership, right? Don't blame them that you're not growing, because you can still make a choice. You can say, you're not taking this from me. I'm choosing to give this to you. I'm not shutting off my brain. I'm choosing to give this to you. So you can still grow as a courageous follower, but that's the difference. Anybody else? Yeah.
As a young leader, what is something that you could have learned that you learned now?
You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have a plan for every single thing. Focus on being good. Focus on being kind. Focus on what you know to be true and living that in front of everybody. And not trying to... My dad told me something that it took me a long time to really believe it, and it was, you can either be who you are, or you can prove to everybody who you're not. But you won't have the energy to do both. You have to pick one in order to do it well. But if you be who you are in front of people who are telling you a lie about who you are, it is its own argument, And I wish I had gotten that earlier. I wanted to get it, but I couldn't get it because I wanted to prove everybody wrong. So I think that was a big thing. I was actually thinking not too long ago, just a couple weeks ago, I was thinking if I could tell myself, my younger self, anything, what would I want to tell her? And I started thinking, well, I wouldn't want to tell her anything that would undo marrying my husband or adopting my son, because those are the two most precious treasures in my life. And then I started thinking about mistakes that I made or things that, that I did that I would have done differently now. And I started thinking, but how I learned those things was doing it wrong, and then learning how to forgive myself and be kind to myself, that I was allowed to not be perfect. And so as I started thinking about it over and over again, what I finally came up with is that I would want to come alongside myself and say, you're wrong about a lot of things, but just keep going. Because you're going to be okay. And you're going to love who you turn into. Just keep going. And that was kind of a liberating thing to realize that, it's okay. We're going to be wrong about a lot of things, but that's how we learn. And I don't want to change who I am now other than continuing to grow. But I don't want to, if I had the answers, then I would have not earned it. And I earned it. I own it because of the stuff that I went through. So that's all I would want to really tell myself is, you're wrong about so much. Keep going. And I love who you become, and you will too. It's going to be worth it. And just hang on, just keep going. Yeah. Anybody else? I wish I had more than a day. It'd be so fun to just hang with you guys for a little bit. But I'll tell you this, Dr. Hunt has my email, and I know that not everybody processes quickly, and sometimes you need space to just think about things and then talk about things. And I just want you to know, if you ever want to talk to somebody outside the circle, just get it off your chest or say something. She's got my email, and you are welcome. You are more than welcome to I'll come alongside, I'll cheer you on. Just know that you got a friend in me. Anybody else? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this evening. It's been awesome.